Hello, speaker friends, and welcome to another episode of Pastatime with the Scariest Podcast.
Woo!
I'm Robin Grace, this is Adam Diaz.
Hello.
And today we're here to read some Pastatime, some creepypastas. Adam, why don't you tell us what creepypastas are?
Sure. Creepypastas are short, sometimes, fictional horror stories that are found on internet communities like Creepypasta. There's one that you go to on Reddit, right? No Sleep Reddit or something like that?
Yeah, there's the R, No Sleep.
There's that one. There's also the SCP Foundation and some original fictional stories that we get from our own Spooky Friends community. Robin, if someone had a story they would like to recommend we read, or if they wanted to reach out to us and say, hey, I have a story I think you all should read, how can they get a hold of us? You
can email us, pastatime@scariest.com. You can also go to our website, scariest.com, and you can go to the Contact Us page, fill out that form, and it gets to us that way.
Indeed. So, like Robin said, we're going to be reading 4. I think they're all creepypastas today. I'm going to go ahead and read my first creepypasta, and this one's called My Fear of Water. And it goes like this. I've always had a terrible fear of being submerged completely in water. Not that I can't swim or anything. My dad made me learn. He said I almost drowned when I was really young. This hits deep pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I was afraid of it because for as long as I can remember, whenever I am underwater and look up at the surface, I see a woman reaching down to me with a warm smile, with glowing golden hair and dark blue eyes. Even if it's just in a bathtub. It always happens. It was just normal for me, but I never got used to it.
That's weird.
It was also unnerving, but also soothing at the same time. She always made me feel like it was okay. I still avoided it, though, because I was just a kid, and it was really freaky. I never told my dad about it as a kid, but I did ask him about my mom. He never wanted to talk about her. Sometimes he even got mad at me for trying too hard to bring it up. It was only recently that I described this apparition to him. He nearly drove into a telephone pole. Obviously, he knew something. I asked him again about my mom. He still wouldn't say much, except that she died when I was very young and that she loved me very much. He also admitted that her hair and eyes were those colors just like mine.
All right, so according to this story, it seems like the person that's reaching into the water is their mom.
Yes.
Okay.
So, I did some research on my own, looking up her name for myself on my birth certificate and trying to find any references I could, any news clips about a boy nearly drowning, anything. I mostly wanted a picture, something I could match to my guardian angel. Today, buried in our town library, I found it. Winchester, so I'm guessing this is the name of the town. Mary Withy, 28, drowned to death yesterday evening after climbing a razor wire fence and fleeing to a nearby reservoir. A funeral is scheduled by her family for the 25th. Marie was institutionalized just 6 months ago after being found not guilty of attempted murder on grounds of insanity. Her husband, Daniel Withy, had acted quickly enough to rescue their infant child when she was found trying to drown him in the bathtub.
Fuck! So the person that they keep seeing is their mom drowning them.
Correct. The guardian angel that they keep seeing is actually the spirit of their mom being like, I'm here to finish the job. That's the end of it. And as someone who almost drowned when they were a kid, when I read the ending, I was like, that's fucked up. Wow. Adding it onto my script.
Dang, dude. That's nuts.
Yeah. So I enjoyed that one. Nice one to kick off the show with, I think. Yeah. So fun times. Before we move into the next creepypasta, did I say next? I don't know. Before we move into the next creepypasta, I want to say thank you on behalf of my mom to everyone who wished her a happy birthday yesterday. I basically posted something on her Facebook saying happy birthday, as most of us do to our parents when it's their birthdays. And a bunch of spooky friends jumped on there and wished her a happy birthday. She was very touched by it. It was very nice to see like this post just sort of explode with all these people that have never met her face to face wishing her a happy birthday. And she wanted me to make sure she said thank you to everyone in case she missed anyone, because she was diligently going through and putting a heart reaction on anyone who said happy birthday to her and saying thank you.
All right. So I'm going to get into my first story here, and the title for this one is Mr. Smile. Not to be confused with Smile Dog. It was in early November of 1997 that a series of very strange sessions led a child psychologist in Maine to contact the authorities.
Y'all remember 1997, right?
It began when a patient of his began to tell him about one of their quote-unquote friends. This friend, being imaginary as far as both the psychiatrist and the boy's parents were concerned, he called his friend Mr. Smile, and would talk about him at great length during some sessions. The boy called him Mr. Smile, both because he would always be smiling and because, when he was around the boy, said everything felt happy. Quote unquote, happy. He said that there was a feeling of everything being okay. The boy in question was being treated for serious issues to do with anger and depression, but when Mr. Smile was around, he said that all that anger and the sadness seemed to just disappear. He said that Mr. Smile wouldn't speak, but rather just stand there at the foot of his bed. He smelled like candy floss, which is like cotton candy, just a different word for cotton candy. And
I've never heard that before, actually.
For real?
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
I've only ever heard cotton candy.
Today you learned.
I did indeed.
And just by being there, he made the boy feel calm and safe. The psychiatrist assumed his imaginary friend was some sort of coping mechanism that the boy had developed to deal with the problems at home that had led to his violent temper, and thought nothing much of it. Until another patient, a girl of about 9 years old, also began talking about her imaginary friend, Mr. Smile. And then a boy of 7, and then a boy of 12, and then another girl of 11. All in all, close to 15 separate patients all began to talk to him about Mr. Smile.
This is creepy as shit.
The first few he'd put down to coincidence. After all, many children have imaginary friends, and the name and description of Mr. Smile were just generic enough that it didn't concern him too much at first.
Sure, kids are dumb.
But as more and more of his patients told him about Mr. Smile, he began to grow concerned. He asked for more details. Every single one of them described him the same way, using the exact same words. Now, there was no way that all of these children could be in contact with each other. 5 of them, for instance, were currently being homeschooled, and according to their parents, when he spoke to them, never really even left the house, except when it was to accompany them on shopping trips or things like that. There was no way that every single one of those kids could have rehearsed or prepared their statements together, which led him to a deeply disturbing conclusion. He spoke privately with each of the children's parents, one at a time. He avoided disclosing too much information, but told them that something troubling had cropped up in multiple sessions with various patients, and that he believed that there was a chance that their child was at risk. He asked for their permission to discuss matters with the authorities, and the parents gave their consent, provided they were kept in the loop as to what was going on. And so, over the course of the next week, the police came and talked to the children about their quote-unquote friend. They asked for details about his appearance, which they couldn't seem to describe apart from the smile, and that he was, quote, not like them, end quote.
That's creepy. It reminds me of the first season of Haunting of Hill House.
Yeah.
Because the girl sees Mr. Smiley, right?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
How he got into their house, anything he said or did while he was there. Because by this point, the psychiatrist, the parents, and the police were all convinced that Mr. Smile was quite real and quite dangerous. The authorities had checked to make sure there were no known predators living in the area, which they had confirmed was not the case. But it was quite clear that whoever this Mr. Smile was, he was a real person who had been sneaking into the homes of these children at night. None of the children claimed to know how he got in. They said they would just wake up and he'd be there at the foot of their bed. Sometimes they said he would be singing something, but not in English. It sounded like a lullaby, they said. It made them feel safe. Finally, the children were asked to draw Mr. Smile, as they couldn't put into words how he looked. Each and every one of those children picked up a red crayon and proceeded to color in the entire page until it was just a rectangle of red.
What the fuck is happening?
When asked about this, they insisted that they had drawn Mr. Smile. When asked where his head, arms, and legs were, they would insist that they had drawn those. They claimed that they had drawn a perfect picture of the man at the foot of their bed, and when they were told that they had simply colored in the page and not drawn anything at all, they became deeply angry, feeling that they were being accused of lying and insisting that they had drawn a picture of the man that they had seen. Acting more on a hunch than anything else, the psychiatrist decided to show one of the colored rectangles to the various children and ask them what it was. Each and every one of them, with no knowledge of what the picture was supposed to be or who had drawn it, and with no knowledge that the other children had been spoken to about this subject even existed, replied that it was a picture of Mr. Smile. Cameras and baby monitors were placed in the children's rooms so that they could be monitored. Many of the parents simply stopped sleeping altogether, staying up all night staring at the screens that displayed where their children had slept. At no point did anyone enter or exit the bedrooms. No sounds, except for them snoring or occasionally talking in their sleep, were ever heard over the baby monitors. There was no sign of Mr. Smile. After almost 2 weeks of this, many of them began to doubt that Mr. Smile had ever existed. Other psychiatrists since have put the whole thing down to some strange shared delusion that, while it couldn't be explained, did not have any basis in reality. Some suggested that maybe this whole Mr. Smile thing had its basis in a TV show or film that the children had all watched, leading them all to dream up something similar.
That's logical.
Then, one of the boys went missing. The camera in his room had gone dead at around 2 a.m. His mother had run to check in on him, only to find his room empty. It had literally taken her less than a minute to run to his room. There was no possible way for him to leave or be taken and be out of her sight in the time it took her to leave her bedroom and run towards his. But he was gone. She said there was a smell like cotton candy in the room. The search for the boy turned up nothing. No one had seen anything strange or unusual around the home before or during the experience, and no trace of him was ever found. It was less than a week later that one of the girls who had spoken of Mr. Smile vanished as well. Then another of the boys. One by one, each of them began to disappear until only 4 remained.
This is almost like It now.
Mayhaps. The 4 remaining children began to talk about how Mr. Smile and his friends were going to take them away soon. When asked about these friends, they talked about how Mr. Smile lived with the other smiling men in, quote-unquote, the happy place.
Fuck that.
And that he would take them there soon. They said that there were lots of people there already and that in the happy place, everything was beautiful. They said that they knew about it because Mr. Smile talked to them, quote-unquote, in their heads, because he couldn't talk like other people did, and that he would show them pictures in their heads of the place that they were going. Things began to get increasingly disturbing. After a few weeks, the children began complaining of headaches and nausea. Their schools reported that they had begun to suffer hallucinations, and 2 of them started complaining that they didn't like the place that Mr. Smile was showing them anymore. One began screaming for half an hour, acting as if they were having a fit and screaming for the colors to stop, that the colors were, quote-unquote, horrible, and that they needed to go away. One of the children claimed that Mr. Smile was talking to them in their head all the time now and was telling them things, terrible things, but that they couldn't talk about it, that they mustn't because then their parents would know about the terrible things too. The psychiatrist asked them to write down what Mr. Smile was saying and promising that he would show it to no one, managing to gain the trust of one of the boys enough that he agreed. The contents of the book are known only to him and the authorities, but whenever anyone involved has been asked about it, they just get real quiet and quickly find an excuse to change the subject. The children stopped sleeping. Footage from the security cameras showed them sitting bolt upright, their eyes unblinking, just staring at the wall without moving or making a sound. Sedatives did nothing. One of the girls began cutting strange circular marks into her skin, while 2 of the boys ceased communicating in English altogether. The language they spoke was never identified, and despite numerous people being asked to listen to them, they could not translate what they were saying. By the start of 1999, so it's that 2 years later,
I don't remember 1999.
All 4 of the children had vanished into thin air. There was no trace of who took them. Searches have turned up nothing to this day, with no indication of where they are or if they're even dead or alive. No suspects have ever been found either. All 4 of them appear to simply vanish into thin air, much like the others, all of whom also remain missing, their disappearances unexplained.
Wow.
Yeah.
I will say, this thing really, really built and built and built and then crescendoed. And then the end of it is basically like, and fuck you. Like, they just disappear and there's nothing else we can tell you about it.
It's an unsolved mystery.
It's pretty creepy, though. It's pretty well written, too.
Yeah, I like it. I liked that story just because It is definitely one of the huge fears that I have. Just
Mr. Smile.
Children disappearing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's a terrifying thought for me, children disappearing.
It just, like, it evokes so many questions to me. Like, how many kids altogether, when you start thinking about that number, like, is there a specific reason it was that many kids? Has it happened before? Is Mr. Smile, is this the only time Mr. Smile has ever been talked about? Why the color red? Did you try coloring in an entire paper with red and then showing it to them? Like, you're not the one that tried to draw Mr. Smile and then being like, it's a fucking page that's just colored in red, bro.
You could, that would have been a test where it's like, you do that and show them yours and then show them another kid's. And if they can discern the difference, then
like two identical, completely red pieces of paper. Yeah. One that was drawn by a kid supposedly drawing Mr. Smile and one by me, and see what they see.
It would be nuts.
So there's so many things about this that make me want more. In no way, shape, or form am I criticizing it. It's one of those things that's written where I think the author
I would like to read more of this story.
Write more of this. Yeah. Whoever wrote this, write more. So that's just the way I look at it when I read it, or when I listen to it, excuse me. Because it's really good. Good pick. So, solid stuff. So before we move into our next story, we are going to take a really quick commercial break. And we're back. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to my next creepypasta of the show.
Molesty.
And this one's called The Well. And it goes, and this one's a little bit longer. This one goes like this. My grandfather grew up on a chicken farm outside of Krakow, Poland. He passed away a few years ago at the age of 82. A few days before his passing, due to an aggressive form of stomach cancer, he sat down next to him in his old rocking chair and said in his familiar Polish accent, after I took the boat to New York, I promised to leave this story behind.
No.
He didn't look up as he spoke to me, simply staring into his cup of black coffee. It's been 70 years, and I must tell someone before I meet God.
Oh, jeez.
I was born in a small, quaint, empty town, which, despite the Nazi occupation, still functioned. We lived in this 2-bedroom farmhouse. My father, my mother, my brothers, Michael and Igor. I'm sorry you never got to meet any of them.
Solid names, though.
Anyway, Michael and Igor were twins. Identical twins, actually. Ugh, gross. And we had heard...
What the fuck?
We know so many twins.
We know so many twins.
And we had heard rumors of Nazis' fascination with identical twins. This forced us to be even more reserved, even though we already lived in a secluded part of the countryside in the last occupied house in town. In order to avoid going into the occupied towns, we basically ate only chicken and eggs for every meal. There's nothing wrong with that. And whatever else Mama could gather from the garden. It was lonely, but we survived. The thing that was most difficult for me was the fact that I had to sleep in the basement. Due to Michael and Igor being toddlers, they required my father and mother's attention. The basement was cold, with only a small window, and the moonlight was the only light I got. Because of this, I always delayed going down there until I was absolutely exhausted so I wouldn't have to lie there awake. On the nights that I couldn't manage to sleep, I would look out of the window, which gave me a small view of the garden and the large abandoned water well. This was my daily activity throughout those lonely, war-torn nights. In general, it was boring and uneventful, but occasionally I would catch a glimpse of a family, or even just a man or two lovers, sneaking their way through our garden up to our front door. They always looked rushed and frightened, and sometimes wore tattered uniforms. What would follow were horrible sounds of banging and pleading for whoever lived there to open up, followed by an argument between my mother and father over whether we should let them in.
What the what?
They're obviously folks that are trying to be put into concentration camps or fleeing the Nazis.
It's just terrifying.
Yeah, and it's way too real. He moved in the chair to adjust himself. You see, son, we didn't know it. Well, at least I didn't. That we lived fairly close to Auschwitz concentration camp, and that those people were escapees. Well, did your father let them in? I asked impatiently. No, he said. It would have been a death sentence for them as well as for us. The Nazis didn't like Poles, and they tolerated us, and it was easier to hide Michael and Igor than an entire family. My father did what he had to do in order to keep his family alive. As the war went on, fewer and fewer people began showing up in the middle of the night. That's about the time our chicken and vegetables began to disappear.
Okay.
Losing our only supply of food would not have been tolerable, and at that point, my father suspected it was the escapees, so he built a fence around our property. Despite this, the chickens continued to disappear. They weren't killed, they were simply gone. Just vanished from their cages and pens. One night, I decided to stay up myself in order to see if I could find out the answer. I battled my tiredness until the wee hours of the morning, and despite the poor lighting and rain, I caught a glimpse of what seemed to be a human figure run across the garden. I rushed upstairs to tell my father, and he ran outside with a knife. The best home defense weapon we could afford, but we found nothing. No one. The next day we did find something, though. Footprints, leading from the chicken cages to the water well.
Was it human?
They were made in the wet mud from the rain, and they were of bare feet. No shoes, no socks, just feet. My father had mercy on the man who was trying to find refuge and left him a note, indicating that he had 2 days to leave, and then he would begin to seal the well. I waited impatiently. For my grandfather to tell me about the fate of the man. The following night, I got the idea to take a blanket down the well to the man since winter was creeping in. I waited until my parents were asleep, and I snuck outside. I shouted something friendly down the well, indicating to the poor man that my intentions were benign, and I began my descent, clinging hand and foot to the pegs attached to the stones. As I neared the bottom, I smelled something absolutely horrific, and I pulled my father's flashlight from my pocket to try and shine it on the man.
Oh, geez.
It was then I came to the realization of just how large the well was, having been used to supply water for the entire town and its families in the past. Families which no longer remained. But I found no man, only a hole, a gap in the stone where the wall of the well had collapsed, opening up to some type of crevice only 2 meters wide and 3 meters deep and tall. Inside sat not a man, but an entire family, of which only a single skeleton-like creature survived. The light reflected off its sunken eyes and gray skin. Blood covered its face, and chicken carcasses were strewn everywhere, a pile of decomposing poultry beside a woman and what I suspected had been her son and daughter.
Oh my.
Children who couldn't have been much more than 5 years old. And they seemed to have been dead for weeks. The man, if he could even be called that, just gazed at the light, and I stared back, incapable of breaking his stare. I did not feel threatened by him, for he lacked any aggression whatsoever. He simply crouched motionless without a sound next to the putrefying bodies of his loved ones, and the chickens that must have been his source of water, as their meat was uneaten.
Oh my. So he was just sucking the blood out of the chickens.
That's so gross. He was empty, devoid of whatever in us makes us human. He should have realized the members of his family had died long ago, but he was still bringing food for their corpses. He couldn't accept it. He did finally turn his head, though, when I shone the light back onto the corpse of his daughter. He stared at her, then sat down closer to her and continued his vigil. "You can leave now," I said to him. "I'll open the gate so you can escape. My father will seal the well in the morning. Please leave now." My young voice and advice seemed to have no effect on him. At that moment, I decided it would be better for me to just climb back up the well and leave, and hope the man would follow and escape. As I began my climb, I shone the light on him one final time. "What did you see, Grandpa?" I shuddered. I saw a tear fall from his eye. He had become a man once again. He was only able to break free from that delusion after seeing the body of his daughter, which had until that time been obscured by the darkness. He realized then that he had been bringing food not to his family, but to corpses. That night it rained again, but in the morning when my father returned to seal the well, I found no footprints leading out of it.
So he sealed the dude in there.
Correct. The dude stayed.
Fudge, dude.
Yeah, that one was really intense. When I read it, I was like, it was so well written. I have to share it on the show.
It's depressing because I'm sure during that time, shit like that actually happened.
That's the scariest thing about that is that it's just such a horrific story. And yes, it is absolutely fictional, but it is about an event that occurred where stuff like this and the human atrocities that did happen during World War II were horrific in that way.
Yep.
So as I read it, I was like, fuck it, I'm sharing it. It's really well written. It's really intense. And who the hell knows? Someone could have put it on Creepypasta because they didn't want to post it somewhere else and it's something that might have actually happened, which is something that people theorize about with creepypastas when they're like scary in the right way.
Yeah.
When they're like sad and haunting, we don't really think about it that way. So that was my last one, and Robin still has one to go.
Nice. All right. So the last story of the episode is titled Her Protection, and it goes the following. In every major town and city, there is a house of which no official record exists, and whose windows have been boarded up for longer than anyone around can remember. The previous occupants, if there were any, are untraceable, and no organization or individual will ever lay claim to the plot on which it stands. Nevertheless, when you break in, always through a back ground floor window, you must never touch the outer doors. You will see amongst the dust the signs of inhabitants long gone. A flattened cardboard box, an overturned child's cot, balding patches on the carpet where the pile has just been worn away. Invariably, there will be an orphaned double mattress in the master bedroom. What you will not see, however, are rats and cockroaches or animal waste. Vermin know better than to come here. These are her sacred places.
Her with a capital H.
Yes. The first time you visit, bring only what you need to help you enter the house. Then, locate the master bedroom. Stand in the center and draw an unbroken circle in the dust around your feet. Make it about 1 meter in diameter to be safe. That's a little over 3 feet, I'm pretty sure.
3.1 feet-ish.
Face the doorway and say out loud.
I'm shaking my head because I saw what it's about to say.
Quote, I wish to make a sacrifice. Will you welcome the offering? End quote. Then leave as quickly as possible. You must not return until night has next fallen. This time, bring nails, a hammer, an empty liter bottle, a sharp, sturdy knife, and a torch. Enter the same way you did last time. Remember the mattress in the master bedroom? Someone will be sleeping there. Don't worry about waking them up. She has taken care of that for you. Turn the sleeper over onto their back and cut their jugular vein.
What the fuck, Robin?
Making sure to collect as much blood as you can.
Also, when they said torch, that means flashlight.
Yep. You will need to pour a little of the blood onto the floor of every room, including this one, but make sure you have some left at the end. When you've finished, leave by the same way you entered and close up the boards again. This is what the hammer and nails are for. Walk home. Speak to nobody on your way. When you get there, tip some of the remaining blood into your right hand and smear it over your door handle before you enter. Then go to bed.
Where the cops can find you for fucking murdering someone.
If there's any blood left, you must pour the rest of it onto any pavement in the city, but do not allow it to be poured down a drain. The knife you must never use again and should bury. Do not trouble yourself with covering your tracks. When you next leave your house, the blood on your door will be gone, and the murder you have committed will have no repercussions. From the moment you leave her temple, capital H, DNA evidence will never again implicate you. Law enforcement will creep around your footsteps without touching them. On cameras, your face will show up as a blur. You are under her protection now. Just make sure you get the right house.
Wow.
It's fucked up.
Pretty fucked up instructions. Scarish does not condone murder of any kind in any way, shape, or form, especially of us if we're going to Philadelphia.
But that's like a creepy...
yeah,
it's like one of those games, you know, those horror.
Murder's not a game, Robin.
No, murder is not a game. It's just terrifying. And then there is also that thing at the end. It's like, better get the right house, otherwise you just murdered someone.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. I was wondering where it was going, and also clearly it's written from someone who uses the metric system because they're going with meters, so it could be anywhere.
There's
in the
a
world,
lot of
but
words that are spelled differently too, like center
R-E instead of E-R.
Yeah.
Madness.
Or organization was with an S instead of a Z.
Okay. So now that we've criticized the way that it was written because it's not what we're familiar with, I will say that it's pretty crazy. And another really good example of why you should not ever believe creepypastas are real, especially stuff like Slender Man, whoever H-E-R, capital H, her is. I don't think you want her protection unless you legitimately are going to go on a crime spree and murdering people.
Yeah, I think it's like... It's for someone who wants to commit crime. So you're okay with murdering in the first place.
The best way to get protection if you're one of these folks is to go to the police and say, lock me up forever and throw away the key.
Yep.
And then you'll also be under protection. And so will we from your murderous ways. So either way, it was a very interesting short story. So good stuff, Roman.
Nice.
I want to thank everyone out there who writes short fiction or fiction in general. And you know what? I want to thank everyone out there who just writes because it's not an easy thing to do, but especially these 4 authors who decided to post these on the internet. We sincerely appreciate folks that share this stuff. And if you have a short story that you would like to share and you would like us to read it, please email pastatime@scarish.com or go to our website, scarish.com, and click on Contact Us. Fill out that form. It comes directly to us. And you can also hit us up on our social medias. Facebook is facebook.com/scarishpodcast. Twitter is @ScarishPod and Instagram is @ScarishPodcast. Robin, for folks who would like to donate to us, how can they do so?
You can go to patreon.com/ScarishPodcast. Those are monthly donations. Tiers start at $1. At $1, you get ad-free episodes, which you can't go wrong with there.
Ad-free is the way to be.
If you're not into the monthly donation type thing, you can also go to Ko-fi, ko-fi.com/ScarishPodcast. Those are one-time donations. All your donations go to upgrading our studio setup, kind of keep us going, invest in the show. We do all our back-end stuff, website hosting, podcast hosting.
It's expensive, and we can do it because of wonderful folks that donate, just like you if you're listening and you donate. And that's it. Shout out to everyone that doesn't donate also, but supports us in all the various other ways. We sincerely appreciate it. We could not do the show without you. You mean the world to us, and we hope you enjoyed this episode. That's everything we have for this episode, so Robin, why don't you go ahead and sign us out.
Keep on creeping on, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Bye.